Hello class, my name is Jonas Marquez, and today I'm here with Kyle Shook. He is an English major here at Troy University, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the famous movie and book, Lord of the Rings. So Kyle, my first question to you is, what is Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings is the fantasy novel of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Many critics have said that Tolkien really defined the genre of fantasy when he created the work, and it is a story in which many of your typical fantasy tropes come into play. You've got elves and wizards and magical beings of that sort, talking animals, come to play, and he introduces this one little tiny race, almost reminiscent of dwarves, but those are also present as well.
Right.
But he introduces this short race of people called hobbits. And a quick rundown of the story is that there's this one particular hobbit named Frodo Baggins,
Right.
who is tasked with taking a golden ring that supposedly has limitless power, and he has to destroy the ring before the evil wizard Sauron can find him, take the ring, and rule the world.
Okay. Awesome. So, I guess we're just going to jump into the real reason that we're having this interview today.
Sure.
Now that we know what Lord of the Rings is,
right.
We know what drew you to Lord of the Rings, and who the author and creator of this complex and intricate world is. You noticed, and you came and talked to me about this a little bit, which would spark my interest.
Sure.
You researched and saw that Lord of the Rings could possibly be an allegory for World War I.
Yes.
So could you just just summarize for us your argument?
Sure.
And if you want to, just give us a rebuttal of why it wouldn't be an allegory for World War I. So you have the floor now.
Sure.
I would love to hear it.
So I actually, this whole thing started when I took Dr. Hoppin's propaganda and persuasion class.
Right.
And what inspired me to study this was that Bethany Davis did her propaganda presentation on Captain America.
Right.
So knowing that I could take that class and give a presentation on something so far outside the box is what really inspired me to try to pursue this study in the first place.
Okay.
Part of that class, what I was originally going to do, I'll say this, was I was just going to analyze the speech that King Aragorn gives at the Battle of the Black Gate towards the end of the series, and I was going to analyze that from a political standpoint and how he unites the kingdoms of Rohan and Gondor into one collective body to fight the forces of Mordor.
Right.
And then Dr. Hoppin told me I had to branch out from outside of the world of Lord of the Rings. I couldn't keep it contained within the book.
Right.
And so that's when I decided to look at it as the work as a whole, as a political statement to the world.
Okay.
And I noticed a lot of character tropes about it, very, very minor things, but what really helps solidify the argument is that you have to look at Lord of the Rings as a franchise and not just a single work.
Right.
Because the Peter Jackson films, especially, have done a number in translating the pages into cinema to better capture this idea that Lord of the Rings is a World War I allegory.
Right, of course.
And so, just to kind of start off the idea, we'll just jump into it. Quite frankly, the first and most evident fact that this is an allegory of some type of war is that, again, you've got an author who previously served in World War I.
Right.
And any kind of significant event in your life is going to impact the rest of your life.
Of course.
Such as fighting in the war to end all wars. As Tolkien fleshed out his characters, he creates hobbits, elves, humans, wizards like Gandalf, who in a lot of ways are more like angels, just based on their nature and the way that Tolkien created them.
Mm-hmm.
And these characters are described and they're shown on screen as these beautiful men and women who are physically perfect. You've got short ones that have a lot of hair, but they still look good. The beards are, even if they're not well kept, it just kind of works.
Yeah.
Gandalf has the long white beard, but it's neatly trimmed.
Mm-hmm.
Hobbits are a very hard-working, we do our thing and we do it well, we don't stir up trouble,
Mm-hmm.
kind of good people. So Tolkien creates these beautiful characters, and he forms them all to be a part of the Fellowship. That's why the first section of the book and the first movie is called The Fellowship of the Ring. And their opponents are orcs, trolls, and two races unique to Tolkien called the Nazgul and the Uruk-hai.
Yeah.
And all of these characters are ugly, monstrous. The Uruk-hai are elves that have been transformed into monsters. They're very hideous beings, mangled teeth, blue skin, black skin, patchy, just terrible looking creatures. And so the line is very clear as to who is a good guy and who is a bad guy.
Right.
This is also evident in the fact that King Theoden of Rohan, he's a human king who has been put under the curse of his evil aid.
Mm-hmm.
And when our heroes first meet King Theoden, he is very old, very decrepit. He's got cracks and wrinkles all on his face. His hair is matted and tangled and very silvery. His eyes are a yellow color, very jaundiced. He looks like he's on his deathbed. He's very antagonistic to our group. He taunts them. He doesn't consider them worthy of his presence.
Right.
And he knows that they're going to he assumes that they're going to fail their quest. And then, as it turns out, as the plot progresses, the curse is lifted on King Theoden. And when the curse is lifted, his skin smoothens out, his hair shrinks back to a more regal appearance. It's dyed back into a natural looking brown color.
Right.
His eyes clear up. He looks healthy, he looks happy, and he very much becomes a good guy, a strong ally to the Fellowship, and leads one half of the army of men into the Battle of Mordor.
Right.
And so Tolkien is very clear about this is a segment of good versus evil. And being in the military and fighting for Britain in World War I, he would have had that mindset of, we are the good guys, and our enemies are the bad guys.
Right.
And we are human, we are elves, and while there are no elves in real life, elves are very respected people. We are good, we are upstanding. Americans are good or upstanding. Frenchmen are good and upstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Our allies, though they might not be us, are allies for a reason, and they are on our side.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, these are enemies. They are nothing more than monsters. We must eliminate the monsters and save the world. The other reason why, and a little bit more evidential reasoning as to why this is a political work and not just a fantasy novel, is laid out in the geography of Lord of the Rings and of Middle-earth.
Right.
I wish I had a map to show you, but here. Imagine with me that you've got a map right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can trace it out. It looks a little bit like the coast of Europe.
Okay.
With a mountain range coming right down the middle. And on this side, we've got, way over here, we've got hobbits and the Shire and Hobbiton come a little bit over, and you've got Rivendell, which is the home of the elves.
Mm-hmm.
And on this mountainside are the dwarves.
Right.
As you start moving more into the center of the land, you get humans to the south, and even more centered, you've got the entire army and nation of Mordor. Now, it might be hard to visualize, but if you see the actual image of the map, it's very evident that this map is modeled on Europe.
Right.
And so the hobbits, elves, dwarves, and to an extent the humans are all on the western half of Europe, and in the middle, about where Germany and Austria-Hungary would be,
right,
is Mordor.
Mm-hmm.
This is also evident in the king's speech at the very end of the installment, and this is one instance in which the movie is more of the political statement than the book. I don't know if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, but at the towards the end of the third movie, King Aragorn, who is the ultimate ruler of men, gives a speech saying, stand, hold your ground, hold your ground. He gives this inspiring speech to the armies of Rohan and Gondor, the two human kingdoms,
right,
to unite them to fight. That speech, apparently, that speech is not in the book.
Right.
That was a Peter Jackson creation to elevate the movie a little bit more. And that speech, when deconstructed, gives a much stronger stance towards a war allegory as a whole.
Right.
He talks about how there might be a day when the age of men comes crashing down,
mm-hmm.
but it's not this day.
Right. So, we are back, and we're going to get back into it. I apologize. My GoPro died, so we're having to use my phone. Just ignore the change in, what would it be?
Quality?
Quality.
Quality is the word he's looking for.
Quality. Anyway, so, back to Kyle. So, we're closing in on your explanation of the war allegory. Would you like to continue?
Yeah. Okay. So, like we've been saying, King Aragorn gives a speech at the Battle of the Black Gate, uniting the two armies.
Right.
At the very end of the speech, his line is, "I bid you stand, men of the West." And going back to the map that we previously drew,
mm-hmm.
naturally, if Mordor is over here, Rohan and Gondor are right about here, they're towards the west. Now, you could, at a very base level, just say, oh, well, it's just because they're on the west of the map. But again, so much of World War I was Western Europe versus Eastern Europe in a lot of ways. Of course, the Russians are over here, and sorry, Russia, that you got left out by Tolkien. But Jackson is echoing this idea that Tolkien created a Europe in this, and so Men of the West would encompass all of these beings to take out the eastern threats of Germany and Austria-Hungary.
Right.
And so it's mainly in the character designs, the geography and the layout of of Middle Earth, and then Tolkien's history that really makes this work a political statement.
Right.
He's not overtly obvious with it, and he doesn't mean to be.
Yeah.
He purposefully is very subtle, and the reason why is because many people have tried to deconstruct this work into a political statement, into a war statement. A lot of people look at Lord of the Rings as a World War II allegory, with the Ring of Power being an allegory for nuclear weaponry.
Right.
Tolkien has gone on record to say that this work is not allegorical, or at least not to the degree of warfare.
Right.
Especially for World War II. But all of his records indicate that he specifies World War II when he says that. So there's that hint that it could be about World War I. The other reason why I still believe that this is a political work is because Tolkien was always very careful with his words that he used.
Right.
He was a philologist, he was a linguist, and so to him, every word is carefully chosen, every word has weight. Tolkien was very much a believer in that there are two kinds of allegory. There is your base level allegory,
Of course.
which is very strict and confining, and it's metaphorical. You know, like that common trope that we see online all the time of people complaining about, you know, the author's blue curtains. Blue curtains are blue because they represent sadness, and there's no other way that the curtains can be any other color or can represent anything else.
Right.
It's blue, it's sadness, it's blue, it's sadness. Like, that's the way the author meant the work to be.
Right.
That's not what Tolkien is arguing in this work. It's not an allegory in that sense. The other kind of allegory is a parable. Of course, one of the most famous parables in all of the history of parables comes from the Bible, when Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son.
Right.
When Jesus told that story, it was about a boy. Of course, we all know the story. Boy gets his father's inheritance, goes off to another land, spends it all, comes back poor, destitute, and humbled, and then the father restores him to his rightful place as heir, and everyone celebrates and has a party.
Right.
We're not supposed to read that story or any of the other parables as, oh, that's a wonderful allegory. Okay. We're supposed to put ourselves in the prodigal son's shoes.
Right.
We're supposed to read that parable and go, oh, this applies to me, and this is what I can learn through that. When Tolkien says that this work is not an allegory, he's saying that this work is a parable, and we're supposed to be able to insert ourselves into the characters in this novel, especially and particularly the hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Pippin, and Merry.
Right.
Tolkien was very fond of the hobbits because they were hardworking creatures who could stand up for what was right when they needed to, and completely change the world.
Right.
And so, and his idea for the hobbits was based on your average infantryman in the war.
Of course, yeah.
You know, these simple guys, they're not the celebrated bomber pilots or fighter pilots or the generals and the sergeants. They were, again, just guys that got drafted into a war, that have to leave their homes and go on this journey that they might not return from. And so Tolkien recreates World War I in a very accessible way for the readers or the viewers of the movie to put ourselves into the shoes of Frodo, of Sam, and destroy the Ring of Power, bring about world peace, or in Sam's case, encourage the people that do and support the people that do and play an integral part in changing the world.
Wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a mouthful.
It is
Wonderful.
That is.
Well, there you have it. Lord of the Rings, an allegory for World War I. Kyle, we appreciate you coming on with us today.
Certainly,
and,
thank you for having me.
Kind of just teaching us a little bit about something that we didn't know about. Today we learned.
For sure.
So,
it was fun.
Thank you. And,
Thank you.
We hope to see you again. And thank you for watching. And have a great day.